Before the break, you heard about Myanmar's decades-long program of otherizing the Rohingya by denationalizing them and implementing policies to persecute them. I will now focus on related but distinct indicators of genocidal intent: Myanmar's campaign of hate speech and propaganda against the Rohingya, and the hateful utterances of Myanmar soldiers during the clearance operations. As I will discuss in detail, Myanmar's anti-Rohingya hate campaign served to dehumanize the Rohingya group and incite hatred and violence against them. At its core, this propaganda portrayed the Rohingya as subhuman and as an existential threat to the Buddhist majority population of Myanmar, such that violence against the Rohingya was not just acceptable, it was necessary. This hate campaign stretched over many years and was disseminated through various forms of media, including through speeches by the chief of Myanmar's military junta, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. It included admitted fabrications about the Rohingya group, as well as the clandestine military use of Facebook accounts to spread hatred of the Rohingya. The anti-Rohingya propaganda served both to justify and incite the genocidal violence during the 2017 clearance operations. And the hateful utterances of Myanmar soldiers during the clearance operations confirm both the impact of that propaganda campaign and Myanmar's genocidal intent. I begin my presentation by showing, with the assistance of historical comparisons, that anti-Rohingya hate speech and propaganda are compelling indicators of genocidal intent. I will then focus on representative examples of anti-Rohingya hate speech and propaganda disseminated through various means, including openly by Myanmar officials, surreptitiously through Facebook accounts, collaboratively by and through extremist Buddhist monks, and finally by Myanmar soldiers during the clearance operations. The inescapable conclusion is that Myanmar acted with genocidal intent as it engaged in its brutal clearance operations against the Rohingya group. The UN fact-finding mission identified two indicators of genocidal intent related to what the Gambia refers to as hate speech or anti-Rohingya propaganda. Those are the insulting, derogatory, racist, and exclusionary utterances of Myanmar officials and others prior, during, and after the clearance operations, and the government's tolerance for public rhetoric of hatred and contempt for the Rohingya. The Gambia has addressed both of these indicators together because of their intertwined nature. There is ample support in case law regarding hate speech or anti-group propaganda serving as an indicator of genocidal intent. Some trial chambers of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, for example, cite the use of derogatory language towards members of the Tutsi group as an indicator of genocidal intent. And others also cite the specific utterances of perpetrators as an indicator of intent. The historical record of other genocides helps to vividly demonstrate hate speech or anti-group propaganda as an indicator of genocidal intent. Key themes of the hate speech and anti-group propaganda used in other such genocides are abundantly present in Myanmar's anti-Rohingya propaganda. I will focus on three of those themes: dehumanization, accusations in a mirror, and threats to group purity, as defined by the Dangerous Speech Project, a nonprofit group of experts focusing on speech that incites violence. The first theme is dehumanization, a critical element in the path to genocide. Hate speech or propaganda that dehumanizes the target group prepares a population to tolerate or engage in violence against that group. Dehumanizing rhetoric often compares the target group to animals, insects, or biological hazards. The point of such comparisons is to make the desired outcome of the speaker, destruction of the targeted group, the natural response to such a threat. In Rwanda, Hutu hate speech against the Tutsi group notoriously referred to them as Inyenzis, or cockroaches, that required extermination. During the Cambodian genocide, the Khmer Rouge regime's enemies were called microbes, or a sickness that needed to be eliminated or removed. The Nazis carried out a long propaganda campaign against Jews, portraying them as vermin, subhuman, and an inferior race. As I will show later, various types of Myanmar's anti-Rohingya propaganda and hate speech dehumanized the Rohingya by using slurs like kalar and referring to them as dogs, carp, crows, maggots, ogres, fleas, and thorns that required elimination. The second theme is called accusations in a mirror. According to the Dangerous Speech Project, the most powerful way to foment intergroup conflict is to frame violence as the only way to protect an in-group against greater harm, even annihilation. To accomplish this, propagandists use a tactic called accusations in a mirror, in which they attribute to their enemies the very acts of violence that they plan to commit against the target group. The term accusations in a mirror originates from a propaganda manual found in Rwanda. Hutu propagandists like Leon Mugesera used this tactic to justify and foment violence against the Tutsis. In one example, Mugesera stated, "These people called Inyenzis, cockroaches, are now on their way to attack us. They only want to exterminate us. They have no other aim." The Nazis employed the same tactics against the Jews. For example, a 1941 pamphlet authored by Joseph Goebbels asks, "Who should die, the Germans or the Jews? You know what your eternal enemy and opponent intends for you. There is only one instrument against his plans for annihilation." General Ratko Mladic, the butcher of Bosnia, who was found guilty of genocide for directing the killings at Srebrenica, had claimed that Muslims, quote, were planning for the complete annihilation of the Serbian people. The use of accusations in a mirror by these individuals in their respective historical contexts in Rwanda, Nazi Germany, and Bosnia exposes their genocidal intent. And as I will soon show, Myanmar, and Senior General Min Aung Hlaing in particular, unambiguously made very clear use of accusations in a mirror. They falsely accused the Rohingya of posing a genocidal threat to Myanmar's Buddhist majority population in order to justify the genocidal clearance operations against them and incite other ethnic groups, especially the Buddhists of Rakhine State, to join and support the slaughter. The last theme is threats to group purity. In such messaging, the hate speech or anti-group propaganda focuses on the threat that the targeted group poses to the purity of one's group. Nazi propaganda often focused on the threat to Aryan racial purity posed by Jews and other targeted groups accused of corrupting German society. Similarly, much of Myanmar's anti-Rohingya propaganda focuses on the threat posed by the Rohingya to the racial purity of Myanmar's so-called national races. All three of these propaganda themes, which featured decisively in past genocides, are central components of Myanmar's anti-Rohingya hate propaganda. This historical context affirms that hate speech and anti-group propaganda is a powerful indicator of Myanmar's genocidal intent against the Rohingya group. Mr. President, before I proceed to discuss the content of Myanmar's hate propaganda, I pause to address Myanmar's argument that much of what the Gambia calls hate speech is not actually hate speech. First, whether the content at issue meets a specific definition of hate speech is immaterial. What the court must determine is whether Myanmar's use of this messaging constitutes an indicator of genocidal intent, as argued by the Gambia and as supported by historical comparison and international jurisprudence. Second, Myanmar does not propose its own definition of hate speech, nor is there an established definition of it under international law. Both the UN fact-finding mission and the IIMM provided their own definition of the term for purposes of their respective reports. The fact-finding mission used the term to refer to any expression of violent or discriminatory hatred towards people. In its report entitled Anti-Rohingya Hate Speech on Facebook, the IIMM considered content as hate speech if, in its view, it, quote, was intended or likely to influence its audience to fear the target group, hate the target group, and or to encourage, support, or excuse discriminatory measures or violence directed against the target group. To the extent that a definition of hate speech is necessary or helpful, the Gambia considers the mechanisms most relevant. Myanmar also argues that hate speech is a global problem and not a challenge unique to Myanmar. That may be true, but most states have not engaged in years-long anti-group hate propaganda campaigns, including clandestine ones on social media. Nor do most states launch military attacks on civilians with its soldiers uttering hateful anti-group messages as they engage in brutal genocidal violence. In any event, whether similarly dangerous anti-group hate speech and propaganda exists in other countries is not the focus of this case. Mr. President, members of the court, I will now focus on representative examples of Myanmar's anti-Rohingya hate speech and propaganda as it has been disseminated by senior Myanmar officials and institutions. I begin at the top with the head of the military junta government, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. In early September 2017, just days after the second wave of clearance operations commenced, in a widely disseminated speech, Senior General Hlaing said the following: Rakhine ethnics lost their land in the Alethankia crisis that broke out in Rakhine State in 1942, in which Bengalis attacked, murdered, and coerced them into leaving their homes. We will never let such a terrible occurrence happen again. During the Alethankia crisis in 1942, over 20,000 ethnic Rakhine people were slaughtered. Bengalis, after murdering ethnic Rakhine people, seized their lands and villages and lived there. The Bengali problem was a long-standing one, which has become an unfinished job, despite the efforts of previous governments to solve it. The government in office is taking great care in solving the problem. This is an example of accusations in a mirror, with a historical twist, where Senior General Lang is blaming the Rohingya for historical violence and using that to justify the government's violence against them to resolve the unfinished job. The UN fact-finding mission found that the Commander-in-Chief's explicit link between the 2017 clearance operations in Rakhine State and an unfinished Bengali problem dating back to 1942 reveals that the 2017 military operation was not only to respond to the Arsa attacks and to quell the threat posed by this group, as has been claimed. It rather speaks to a broader objective on the part of the Tatmadaw with historical roots and reinforces the narrative that all Bengali are a problem and that a distinction between terrorists and civilians or victims is not relevant. Later that same month, September 2017, while the clearance operations were still in progress, Senior General Lang, in another widely disseminated speech, said, quote, "The Bengali population exploded, and the aliens tried to seize the land of local ethnics. Race cannot be swallowed by the ground, but only by another race. All must be loyal to the state in serving their duties so that such cases will never happen again." End quote. Here again, Senior General Lang is deploying accusations in a mirror. He accuses the Rohingya of trying to seize Rakhine land. He invokes the Myanmar government's motto of racial paranoia, raising the threat that the Rohingya will swallow up the Rakhine race. And he demands loyalty to the state, which, he says, is carrying out its duties to make sure that such violence from the Rohingya does not happen again. There is a third example of Senior General Lang deploying accusations in a mirror, this time explicitly regarding genocide. In a public speech in December 2017, Senior General Lang said, quote, "During the latest terrorist attack in Rakhine State on 25 August 2017, villages of local national races were threatened, and many local national races people were murdered. Our Tatmadaw have to safeguard the national races forever and carry out for them to live in unity and peace. Tatmadaw must fully protect the ethnic minorities in Rakhine region, not to have the genocide." End quote. This was a clear message that the Rakhine must be protected from genocide by the Rohingya. This propaganda, blaming the Rohingya for potential genocide to justify violence against them, is as direct an expression of genocidal intent as that by Mugesera, Goebbels, and Mladic. There should be no doubt about Senior General Lang's genocidal intent against the Rohingya. Mr. President, the same intent vis-à-vis the Rohingya is evident in the Tatmadaw generally as well. Tatmadaw training materials from 2012 entitled "Fear of Extinction of Race" propagates the narrative that the Rohingya pose a threat to Buddhist existence. It also uses dehumanizing slurs and invokes threats to Buddhist racial purity. It contains the following propaganda. The danger of being swallowed up by Bangladeshi Chittagonian kowtow collars truly exists. No race fears extinction from being swallowed up by the earth, but by human beings. Bengali Muslims infiltrate the people to propagate their religion. We need to protect our race and religion as much as possible. Otherwise, Buddhism may vanish. The UN fact-finding mission observed that through its training program, the Tatmadaw indoctrinates cadets with the concept that Islam constitutes an existential threat to Buddhism, such that the, quote, probability of population extinction truly exists. A book from the 1980s with the same title as the Tatmadaw training program, Fear of Extinction of the Race, had been distributed by the government. Like the training program, the book presents Islam as an existential threat to Buddhism. One passage states, quote, "If we are not careful, it is certain that the whole country will be swallowed by the Muslim Kalars. When we study world history, we can see that different races of the world did not get swallowed to extinction by the earth, but only by other humans," end quote. Here again, the anti-Rohingya propaganda uses dehumanizing slurs and presents the Rohingya as an existential threat to Buddhist-majority Myanmar. It should perhaps come as no surprise that the Tatmadaw has a department called the Directorate of Public Relations and Psychological Warfare. This department, in July 2018, that is, after the main clearance operations, published a 117-page treatise called Myanmar Politics and the Tatmadaw, Part 1. This document blamed the Rohingya for instigating armed conflict against other ethnic groups in Myanmar based on fabricated evidence. A picture that the Tatmadaw captioned as "Bengalis killed local ethnics brutally" was actually an image from Bangladesh's 1971 independence war. In another fabrication, a long line of migrants is captioned, "Bengalis intruded into the country after the British colonialists occupied the lower part of Myanmar." The image was actually of refugees who had fled Rwanda in 1996. And in yet another fabrication, an image of a boat full of people captioned as "Bengalis entered Myanmar via the watercourse" is actually an altered picture of Rohingya who were trying to escape Myanmar in 2015. Reuters exposed these fabrications, and Myanmar admitted to 2 of them. Other ministries of Myanmar's government also disseminated anti-Rohingya hate propaganda. For example, in 2018, Myanmar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent to several UN offices links to propaganda videos containing anti-Rohingya messaging, including accusations in a mirror. One such video by an anti-Rohingya activist claimed that Myanmar faces a, quote, "threat posed by encroaching Islamic forces that wish to annihilate the ethnic Rakhine community and all other non-Muslims and destroy the deeply rooted indigenous Buddhist culture and even Buddhism itself," end quote. Myanmar's embassy in London disseminated similar materials in 2018. In a letter to a British parliamentary committee, the embassy listed an article which states in part, quote, "The Bengali Muslims have again and again attacked others, and they will again and again do the same if they are allowed to live there. Enough is enough, and the Bengali Muslims have now forfeited their right to live in the land of Rakhine State," end quote. Major political parties in Myanmar have called for genocide against the Rohingya with no legal repercussions. In 2012, when it held the majority in the Rakhine State legislature, the Rakhine Nationalities Development Party called for a final solution for the Rohingya in a printed publication. It said, quote, "Today, the union government and the citizens collectively need to have a decisive stand on the issue of Bengali Muslims. For our citizens, for the maintenance of Buddhism, for the protection of our culture, it is now time to sacrifice. Although Hitler and Eichmann were the greatest enemies of the Jews, they were probably heroes to the Germans. If inhumane acts are sometimes permitted to maintain a race, a country, and the sovereignty, our endeavors to maintain the Rakhine race and the sovereignty and longevity of the Union of Myanmar cannot be labeled as inhumane." End quote. The chair of another political party, the so-called Peace and Diversity Party, incited violence against the Rohingya in 2015 to an audience in Yangon. He said, quote, "I won't say much. I will make it short and direct. Number 1, shoot and kill them. Number 2, shoot and kill them. Number 3, shoot and bury them. Number 4, bury and shoot them. If we do not kill, shoot, and bury them, they will keep sneaking into our country. None of these incidents resulted in prosecution." State-controlled media also published content that dehumanized the Rohingya around the time of the clearance operations, calling them thorns that needed to be removed and blood-sucking fleas. Mr. President, members of the court, I now turn to Myanmar's clandestine anti-Rohingya hate propaganda campaign on Facebook, used to justify its genocidal violence and incite rank-and-file soldiers and other ethnic groups to attack the Rohingya brutally and indiscriminately. Myanmar denies that it engaged in such a clandestine program. As I will show, however, the evidence of Myanmar's covert program is overwhelming and indisputable. First, Facebook, which is now called Meta, conducted internal investigations using confidential methods and technology in late 2018 that uncovered this vast campaign. In an affidavit annexed to the Gambia's reply, Nathaniel Gleicher, head of security policy at Meta Platforms, testified that in August 2018, quote, 6 Facebook accounts, 6 pages, and 1 Instagram account were removed after the individuals or entities associated with those accounts and pages were categorically banned from Meta on human rights grounds. This included the official page for Junta Chief Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. Later that month, Meta removed an additional 12 accounts and 46 pages that it determined were linked to the Myanmar military and the original accounts taken down on human rights grounds. The evidence for that link was based on shared page administrators, shared digital cookies, and shared IP addresses associated with the Myanmar military from which the accounts were accessed. Meta determined that these accounts were engaging in something called coordinated inauthentic behavior, or CIB. By the end of 2018, in total, Meta took down 163 Facebook accounts, 485 pages, 17 groups, and 16 Instagram accounts, all found to be connected to the Myanmar military. Myanmar argues that these accounts were not removed on the basis of human rights concerns or hate speech. First, several accounts, including the official account of Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, were in fact taken down over human rights concerns. Second, Myanmar ignores the meaning of CIB. According to Mr. Gleicher's testimony, quote, Meta considers CIB to be coordinated efforts to manipulate public debate for a strategic goal where fake accounts are central to the operation, end quote. In other words, Meta determined that the Myanmar military was disguising its identity through these accounts to manipulate the public. Here, the goal of its manipulation was to spread anti-Rohingya hate propaganda. Meta's findings were confirmed by the independent investigative reporting by the New York Times in October 2018. Based on information obtained from former military officials, researchers, and civilian officials in Myanmar, the Times reported that hundreds of members of the Myanmar military were the prime operatives behind a systematic campaign on Facebook that stretched back half a decade and that targeted the country's mostly Muslim Rohingya minority group. A separate independent investigation by the IIMM confirmed that the accounts taken down by Meta formed an interconnected military network. The mechanism, which was given access to many of these accounts, including their public posts and metadata, found conclusively that these accounts, quote, formed part of a network on Facebook that was connected to the Myanmar military, end quote. Those links include overlapping administrators and creators, overlapping accounts posting to these pages, shared usernames and email addresses, the appearance of the abbreviation DSITD for the Defense Services Information Technology Department in email addresses used to register the accounts, and overlapping additional metadata like digital cookies and IP addresses connected with the Myanmar military. So how does Myanmar respond to this incontrovertible evidence? You can see on your screens now a passage from paragraph 1137 of Myanmar's rejoinder. Without providing any evidence or citations for its assertions, Myanmar admits that some, quote, government employees or members of the Tatmadaw or the police force created fake Facebook accounts. Then it suggests that a few of them, quote, may have used office internet connections to do so. Then it speculates, again without any evidence, that they might have done so outside the scope of their employment on their own initiative. And as usual, Myanmar concludes with another sweeping denial with no evidence whatsoever and an equal amount of credibility. Mr. President, members of the court, how likely is it that Myanmar security personnel would post tens of thousands of messages on Facebook through hundreds of accounts that they created with their military email addresses from military computers in military facilities consistently over many years on their own initiative without instruction or approval from the Myanmar military itself? That is unimaginable, especially for the Tatmadaw, known for its rigid hierarchy and control. Having established that Myanmar engaged in a several years-long anti-Rohingya hate propaganda campaign on Facebook, we can move on to the content of this campaign. As detailed in its report, the IIMM searched 43 of the removed pages for content between 1 July 2017 to 31 December 2017, before, during, and after the 2017 clearance operations. They found over 10,000 items that fell within its definition of hate speech. Over 4,000 of those items were unique. The rest were duplicates shared multiple times on different pages or on different dates. These messages reached millions of people. Based on its extensive review of this content, the mechanism identified the following 6 themes of Myanmar's anti-Rohingya hate propaganda. A, denial of the Rohingya identity as a distinct ethnicity and/or as natives of Myanmar. Portrayal of the Rohingya as an existential threat to Myanmar. Portrayal of the Rohingya as a threat to racial purity of the recognized Myanmar ethnic people. Portrayal of Islam as a threat to Buddhist religious sanctity. Justification of violence against the Rohingya and/or denigration of the suffering of the Rohingya and portrayal of crimes against them as fabrications. These are, in large part, the same themes: dehumanization, accusations in a mirror, and threats to racial purity that Myanmar and the Tatmadaw have been propagating for many years, as I have already shown. I will now highlight a few representative examples of Myanmar's Facebook posts. On 24 August 2017, the day before the 2017 clearance operations, the Tatmadaw posted a message called Genocide of the Rakhine People, which was then reposted 3 more times over the next several weeks. This post invokes the 1942 incident that General Min Aung Hlaing also referenced, and states that the situation will be worse this time unless the state acts. Quote, May 13, 1942, the day of the Rakhine Genocide. In 1942 riot, only Rakhine people were murdered. If there were similar riots in the future, Rakhine might well disappear. This is because the Kalar are strong financially, well connected to the media and international organizations. Rakhine state will disappear if Myanmar and Rakhine are not united, or the state fails to adopt secure and strong policies. The Tatmadaw posted a similar message entitled Written with Rakhine Blood on 26 August 2017, the day after the 2017 clearance operations commenced. Once again, invoking the 1942 massacres, this post emphasizes unity to confront the Rohingya threat to Buddhist Myanmar. I won't read from the post, but the key language is on the slide on your screens. The Tatmadaw posted a message on 29 July 2017, and then again on 19 December 2017. That is, before and during the clearance operations, entitled, Why Did Hitler Kill the Jews? The post included pictures of Hitler and Nazis and read as follows, quote, In April 1939, horrifying massacre called the Danzig Massacres, or Bloody Sunday, broke out. More than 58,000 Germans were killed. Because of the massacre, Hitler quickly invaded Poland. The subsequent revenge of the Nazi Germans after their occupation of Poland against Polish Jews who had brutally massacred the German ethnics was reminded to this day lest the world forget. In his extraordinary and amazing speech, Hitler said to the Polish government directly, Danzig had been a German town. We were taking this town back today. The case of the brutal killing of 58,000 ethnic Germans in Poland just before the start of the war was swiftly and urgently dealt with. The perpetrators of such atrocities were only avenged, life for life, by the shootings of German sharpshooters. Why? Why would the Tatmadaw post this message before and during the clearance operations? This message excused and justified the Nazi invasion of Poland and the genocide of Jews that followed as avenging the false claim that Polish Jews had killed 58,000 ethnic Germans. The Tatmadaw is drawing a parallel here to justify its genocidal violence against the Rohingya. its genocidal clearance operations are presented as revenge for the false claim that Rohingya had killed more than 20,000 ethnic Rakhine in 1942. On 27 August 2017, right after the 2017 clearance operations began, the Tatmadaw posted a message inciting violence entitled, "Let's Eat Dog Meat." It depicted a popular singer with a gun, used dehumanizing language, and incited violence against Rohingya dogs. Quote, "Today I heard that our Myanmar West Gate suffered a break-in that destroyed it. I'm ready to grab this thing called a gun. If one tries to behave like a dog, plot like a dog, then I don't hesitate to eat dog meat." On 28 August 2017, the Tatmadaw disseminated a video entitled "Soldier Rallying Ethnic Rakhine" on several Facebook pages. This video shows a Tatmadaw soldier using dehumanizing language, inciting ethnic Rakhine to genocide against the Rohingya, who are described as an existential threat. The soldier explains that the clearance operations will remove the Rohingya animals from their villages. Quote, "Our country, our state, our town, our village need our protection. Their population growth is large and increasing. They want to take over our ethnic minority population. We will clear the villages where those animals live. What we mean by clearing is that we know where the ethnic villages are located. We have marked the places. There will be a group blocking the Rohingya. There will be another group doing the clearing. The soldiers will be doing the clearing systematically. We will be moving around the area, clearing the villages of these animals. We have guns, we have bullets. That's what we came with ammunition and the spirit to attack these animals. We have come here. From small children to old people, if you can carry a sword, then carry a sword. If you can carry a stick, then carry a stick. Carry whatever you can and bravely face these animals. We need courage." End quote. The Tatmadaw shared a post on 2 Facebook pages on 6 September 2017 entitled 9/11 Myanmar and Cartoons, accompanied by 4 cartoons that depict Rohingya killing Rakhine, inciting Rakhine people to violence against Rohingya. Quote, "During the jihad attack of Muslims in Indonesia and Bangladesh, old people killed other old people. Women killed other women. Children killed children. Hundreds of thousands of Buddhist necks were slain by Muslims' blades. Now Myanmar, which is a Buddhist country, in order to prevent the same scenario that happened in Indonesia and Bangladesh, I want you to sharpen even the knives that you do not use at home. The ethnic Rakhine people who have faced the jihad will know best." End quote. In September 2017, during the clearance operations and while the military was burning down Rohingya villages, the Tatmadaw disseminated several posts spreading the false claim that the Rohingya burned their own homes and villages. One post with a cartoon image of Nobel Peace Laureate Ms. Malala Yousafzai claims the Rohingya, quote, "will also burn the entire Myanmar," end quote, to, quote, "snatch away more land." In other posts, the Tatmadaw shared images purporting to show Rohingya setting fire to their own huts. This attempted fabrication was exposed by journalists like Jonathan Head, who testifies as an eyewitness that the Tatmadaw used members of the local Hindu community to pose as Muslim Rohingya in these propaganda images. His affidavit is at Annex 375 of the memorial. Several of the Tatmadaw posts in September 2017, during the clearance operations, sought to dehumanize the Rohingya, calling them maggots in the flesh and accusing them of breeding like rabbits. On 2 October 2017, the Tatmadaw posted a message entitled, quote, "You can get a 6-foot pit." The message was addressed to Kalars, a dehumanizing slur used against the Rohingya, threatening them with death. Quote, "Kalar so, like you, relatives of cows, we don't hesitate to punch you till your teeth fall out. You won't get a seat at the table, Marmoods. If you say you love the Myanmar land so much, you can get a 6-foot pit." The bracketed text that you see is text from the IIMM. A Tatmadaw post from 19 December 2017 entitled, "Myanmar will be a country of whores," was distributed on multiple pages. It praises past pogroms against Rohingya and calls for their exclusion. Quote, "Had General Aung Gyi and Ne Win not launched King Dragon Operation, Garuda Operation in Rakhine State, Buthadong, Mongdo, and Rathadong would definitely not have been on the map of Myanmar, but on the map of Bangladesh. If you continue to give them roles similarly, Myanmar would become a country of whores." Mr. President, all of these messages, which came directly from the Tatmadaw, demonstrate Myanmar's genocidal intent and incitement to genocide against the Rohingya. All of them fit the themes of dehumanization, accusations in a mirror, and threats to racial purity that are the hallmarks of past genocides. Indeed, the Tatmadaw openly invoked the Nazi genocide of Jews to justify its revenge for the false 1942 massacres of Rakhine, the, quote, "unfinished job it was resolving." We also know that the propaganda was effective. In addition to the utterances of soldiers, which I will address later, comments on these posts were filled with calls for genocide. For example, in response to one Tatmadaw post on 24 August 2017, the day before the clearance operations, in which the military reported encountering so-called Bengali terrorists, over 200 comments used language like "kill all Kalar," "shoot and kill all Kalar," "don't leave any one of these Muslim dogs alive," "kill all dogs, make them extinct." Myanmar says that the IIMM report is limited in duration. That is exactly right. From July to December 2017, and even then, the mechanism found over 10,000 items of hate speech. Imagine if the report covered a longer period of time. Myanmar says that only 1% or so of the posts are anti-Rohingya. Exactly right again. That is by design. The Tatmadaw was using fake accounts and inserting propaganda onto Facebook pages that normally would not post about such content in order to maximize impact. Mr. President, I conclude this section of my presentation with the mechanism's final assessment of its report. Quote, "Overall, the mechanism's analysis demonstrates that the Myanmar military spread material designed to instill fear and hatred of the Rohingya minority. It accomplished this by creating a clandestine network of pages on a social media site with the potential to reach an audience of millions. This campaign of hatred was ongoing at the very time that many Rohingya villages were burned, and while thousands of Rohingya men, women, and children were beaten, sexually assaulted, and/or killed, and continued as hundreds of thousands of Rohingya were forced to flee from their homes. The evidence from this analytical project conclusively shows that rather than taking all steps to prevent the violence and protect its people, the Myanmar military conducted a social media campaign that excused and promoted violence against the Rohingya minority. Mr. President, members of the court, Myanmar also spread anti-Rohingya hate propaganda by and through extremist Buddhist monks. They did this to leverage the respect that monks have in a country where almost 90% of the population is Buddhist. The military facilitated the rise of extremist monks who shared its intolerance for the Rohingya. According to a former monk, quote, military leaders approached our fellow monks with offers of financial support and gifts. This emboldened the monks to rise up and speak up in public to spread the pro-military propaganda, spreading hatred between religions, end quote. The main group of such monks was called Ma Ba Tha, or the Association for the Protection of Race and Religion. Ma Ba Tha published anti-Rohingya hate propaganda in official publications. In one article from June 2017, they used dehumanizing language, comparing the Rohingya to weeds that spread uncontrollably. And they warned that, quote, if the Myanmar government and the citizens are not careful, in a few years, Myanmar ethnic people, like the precious flowers, will be swallowed to extinction by the weed-like Bengali, end quote. Another Ma Ba Tha article from November 2016 was entitled, quote, the Myanmar race can go extinct due to the Bengali, end quote. The most prominent of the Ma Ba Tha monks is Ashin Wirathu. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing has donated directly to Wirathu, and photographs of the two together were widely circulated online in 2016. General Min Aung Hlaing awarded Wirathu in 2023 with the honorific Thiri Pyanchi title for his, quote, outstanding work for the good of the Union of Myanmar, end quote. Wirathu regularly uses dehumanizing language to refer to the Rohingya, calling them African carp, snakes, mad dogs, wolves, and jackals. The Tatmadaw disseminated Wirathu's anti-Rohingya propaganda on Facebook. For example, in a post by the Tatmadaw on 18 August 2017 entitled, quote, marry a dog instead of marrying a kalar, end quote, the post amplifies a dehumanizing message from Wirathu that Buddhist women would be better off marrying a dog rather than a kalar due to the existential threat of Rohingya Muslims to Buddhism. The UN fact-finding mission reported that after the first wave of clearance operations in late 2016, the military facilitated Wirathu's travel throughout northern Rakhine State, where he visited villages that the Tatmadaw attacked and met with high-ranking military officers. According to the UN fact-finding mission, he returned to Rakhine State in July 2017 and visited two villages in Rathadong Township that were later subjected to clearance operations, Chutpien and Zaydipien. You will hear and see tomorrow the details of what happened in those villages. The Tatmadaw also shared the messaging of another monk, Sitagu Sayadaw, the highest-ranking monk in Myanmar. Sitagu delivered a highly publicized sermon in October 2017 during the clearance operations, he delivered his speech at a military training garrison. And in his speech, he provided absolution for genocide. Sitagu recounted the following parable, quote, "There were about 500,000 non-religious and evil soldiers who died in the war. Because of that, the king was not able to sleep at night, since in Buddhism, killing humans is one of the worst sins. The 8 monks who knew about this told the king, 'Don't worry, Your Highness. Not a single one of those you killed was Buddhist. They didn't follow the Buddhist teachings, and therefore they did not know what was good or bad. Not knowing good or bad is the nature of animals. Out of over 500,000 you killed, only 1.5 were worth to be humans. Therefore, it is a small sin and does not deserve your worry.'" End quote. Not only was this sermon delivered in front of military troops during the clearance operations, but the Tatmadaw heavily disseminated it over Facebook, posting the sermon 11 times on its network of accounts. The message is clear. It is not a sin to kill Rohingya because they're not Buddhist. And because they are not Buddhist, they are like animals, not knowing what is good or bad. Mr. President, members of the court, I turn finally to the utterances of Myanmar's soldiers, which is both an indicator of genocidal intent and a means of confirming the impact on those soldiers of the propaganda campaign carried out at the highest levels of the Tatmadaw. The court has in its case file the sworn testimony of an IIMM legal officer who took the witness account of a Tatmadaw defector given the IIMM code P5513. That defector stated that the soldiers' quote, "opinion that Rohingya/Bengalis were not nationals of Myanmar was formed by the propaganda they were fed," end quote, and that, quote, "the accumulation of the open abuse by military officers towards Rohingya, together with the military's perception that Rohingya were illegal immigrants, led to soldiers believing they could do what they wanted with respect to the Rohingya," end quote. We can see from the following utterances of soldiers posted online during the clearance operations that they targeted the Rohingya as such for genocidal violence. Quote, "If it's Kalar, get rid of the whole race. Kill all the Kalars that you see in Myanmar. None of them should be left alive. May the terrorist dog Kalars fall fast and die horrible deaths. These non-human Kalar dogs, the Bengalis, are killing and destroying our land, our water, our ethnic people. We need to destroy their race. Stuff pig's fat inside the damn Kalar's mouth. Pour fuel and set fire so that